Well, there's a lot at stake. The United Nations wants to see a global climate deal to succeed the Kyoto Protocol in place by 2009. The new pact should include all nations led by the United States and also involve emerging giants such as China and India. All that, of course, is now at risk without a deal. That's why the UN Secretary-General, Ban Ki-moon, has been drawn back to Bali from a visit to East Timor to help resolve that impasse.
If we are not able to agree on this, I would say that the negotiators will have to bear the historical responsibilities for whole international community and the future of planet Earth.
So why won't the United States give more ground? Joining me now from Washington is Marlo Lewis from the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Well, it's a good question. Why don't they give ground?
Well, Jonathan, somebody has to be the adult in the room. Someone has to insist that climate policy be based, at least in part, on economic and technological reality. And that's not a pretty job, but somebody's got to do it, and the only one to do it is the United States.
Well, I think the European Union would argue they're being the adults in the room. They're saying we've got to have these deep cuts to stop global warming. We've got to cut carbon emissions. It's going to be painful, but there is no alternative, and being an adult means taking pain sometimes.
Well, being an adult means not only keeping your promises, but making promises that you can keep. The industrialized world, led by the European Union, made a promise in Rio in 1992 to lower emissions to 1990 levels by 2000. The industrialized world was 12% above that in the year 2000. The European Union is failing to meet its reduction targets under Kyoto, and their answer is, well, let's make promises to meet even more unrealistic reduction goals.
I suppose it could be argued, though, that the world has got a lot more serious about global warming since 1992, since those Rio agreements, that after all, everyone now understands a little more about what's going on. They understand that tough action more than ever has to be taken.
Well, Jonathan, I think the rhetoric has gotten a little bit more feverish, but if you look, for example, at Britain, at your country, Tony Blair came in 1997 promising to reduce Britain's emissions by 15%, and today Britain's emissions are up by 3%. I mean, there's this huge gap between rhetoric and reality, and in the United States, unfortunately, we can't indulge the fantasy that rhetoric is equivalent to law, because in this country, if you pass a law or sign a treaty, anyone can enforce it through court action. And so we actually have to keep our promises here, which means we have to be very careful about the promises we make.
So what are you expecting? You're expecting the free market to deal with this on its own?
The only way that the world will dramatically reduce emissions is if emission reduction becomes cheap. And right now it's not, because like it or not, we are not beyond petroleum. 85% of the world's energy comes from fossil fuels. We really don't know how to meet the world's current, much less future anticipated energy demands without emissions. Once we learn how to do that, then we can reduce emissions. So the emphasis should be on technology development, not on policies that a technology beyond petroleum technology already exists. It does.
This could be a redundant debate, couldn't it? In less than a year now, there may be a new American president taking office. They might have a completely different view.
Well, yeah, actually, they probably won't, and I'll tell you why. Because Al Gore came to Bali and he scolded President Bush for holding up progress. But what did Al Gore and Bill Clinton do when they had the White House? They negotiated the Kyoto Protocol. They refused to submit it to the Senate for ratification because they knew its goals were so unrealistic our Senate could not ratify it. Now Al Gore is saying we should do something even more unrealistic. I don't think the next president will want to do that.
Marlo Lewis, thank you very much indeed. European Union leaders have been